Hey everybody, I'm really glad you found Suncrest Messages. I do hope you'll take a minute to subscribe to either our podcast or our YouTube channel. And you can also download the Suncrest app. There's great stuff there that goes far beyond these messages. Either way, I hope that the next 30 minutes helps you integrate faith with your life. Enjoy.
How's everybody doing today? Good, you look good. We're going to have some fun today. I promise you fun. There will be a little bit of crowd participation, so I'm going to need your help with me along the way. Let me just add to what Jamie said. If you're here and you haven't been to Welcome to Suncrest yet, and you can by any chance stay from 10:30 to 11:30, just walk down that hall. I'd love to meet you and tell you a little bit more about our church. So here's the idea. We started this new teaching series last week. I have a couple big ideas like to intro this, to get you thinking a little bit. Then I have the big idea that we're going to draw up here, and I'll ask you to draw with me. And then I want you to see places it works in our lives. So I need to do this pretty quickly. I need you to just stick with me, okay? So mnemonic devices. You know what that idea is? A mnemonic device is when you have a way to remember something, and it just helps you when you're doing that. So little word association in the room. I'm going to say something, and you give me the word that's associated with it from this mnemonic device. So the mnemonic device is Roy G. Biv. It's a rainbow, right? It's the spectrum of colors. Some of you are going to learn something today. This is awesome. Roy G. Biv, red, orange, yellow, G, green, blue, indigo, violet. You can always remember it if you can remember Roy G. Biv, which is sometimes the challenge. All right, let me give you another one. Every good boy does fine. Piano lessons, right? I had 3 miserable years of piano lessons myself, and that's pretty much all I remember. I have so much respect for people who can do the music thing, but look that one up later. Okay, you guys can finish this one for me. Righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, right? And tell me you don't do this. I do this like every time I got a screwdriver or a bowl. I'm like, okay, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. And the whole idea is there's an image there that you've attached to something, and now you can remember it. Now it comes to mind when you need it to. That's a really big deal. I'm going to give you one more. Some of you will know this. If Thursday night, like a lot of people didn't know this. I can't believe this. So when I was a child, I learned something that helped me remember which months of the year had 31 days. Do any of you use your knuckles for this? Yes, right? Now watch this. It's awesome. It's awesome. So January, February, March, April, May, June, July. You can either put your other knuckles there, or you can just go back to the beginning. August, September, October, November, December. Every time you're up on a knuckle, it's a month with 31 days. I know. You can use that the rest of your life, okay? And that's kind of the idea of what we're doing over these 4 weeks during Back to the Drawing Board. We're trying to give you kind of a visual vocabulary, something that will stir you when you need it. You'll be able to remember this, and it will help in your walk with God. And sometimes we're teaching you things like Jamie did last week. It's like, okay, how do you experience God in the everyday? And he drew this circle up here, a line, and then a circle. And the whole idea was, man, whenever God gets your attention during the day, you should just pause for a moment, pay attention to that, and think, what is he saying to me? And what should I do with that? And I got to tell you, it works every day if you let it. Now, I'll just give you this very short version. Tuesday of this week, I was doing the Suncrest reading in the Suncrest app, Proverbs chapter 15. Here's my thing. Whenever I tell people to read the Bible, I say, have a plan, but don't let your plan drive you. Don't think you have to finish the chapter or finish 2 chapters or whatever you're reading. You should read until God gets your attention. And then you should stop. Because he's saying something to you through his word, and you should say, oh, what is he saying, and what should I do? Proverbs 15, I only got to the first verse. It says, a gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh response stirs anger. And when I read that, God had my attention, because there's a couple of relationships in my life, one in particular, where lately I feel like that's been me, and the relationship hasn't been going that well. I've been harsh. And so it's just that quick. It's like, oh, that's what God is saying. What am I supposed to do? And I felt like I just need to go acknowledge that to the person, even apologize for the way I've been carrying myself. It's that simple. If you read the scriptures every day, there's a chance for you to hear from God every day. You can work that circle. Sometimes it's not from the scriptures. Sometimes it's just experience. Wednesday morning this week, I found out from a friend of mine that he had an extra ticket to the Purdue game Wednesday night. Boiler up. How about that? It's been a good week. Yesterday, especially if you're IU fans, yesterday was beautiful, wasn't it? Okay, I don't mean to embitter anybody. So here's the idea. When I get an offer of tickets to go to a Purdue game, I take that as the voice of God in my life. All right? Now, actually, here's the truth. I get chances to do a lot of things, and these days, a lot of times I have to say no. or I feel like I have to say no. And I kind of felt that way Wednesday morning. I'm like, no, it's been a busy week. I've already had meetings multiple nights. We have teenagers at home. We have a 1-year-old at home. Like, Jenny doesn't need me to be gone another night. I was about to say no, honestly. And then I stepped back and I thought about it, and there were a couple things going on. First of all, I was in Indianapolis for a meeting, and Purdue was on my way home. That seems of God, doesn't it? Better yet, for all of you who are married, I talked to Jenny, and she said to me, she's like, yeah, she said, I can tell you've been, this is one of your best friends. You've been missing some time. You should go. You should go. And really, genuinely, I don't want you to miss that. It was a rich experience for me, not just the game, but some time with a friend. And I think that's how God wanted me to experience him on Wednesday. And Thursday, every day of this week, you can do that. That's circle. The circle is just a device to remember, like, oh, that's how it works. I can use that when I feel like God's getting my attention. So, mnemonic devices. We're going to come back to that in a second. Totally separate conversation. I have a question for you. I need a show of hands, okay? How many of you are pretty sure that you have a belief, that you believe something in your life that's wrong, that isn't true? How many of you would say, yeah, I probably believe some things that aren't true? Show of hands. Not bad, but not enough. I'm going to give you another chance to answer that question here in just a second after I explain this, okay? So if you didn't raise your hand, I think what that means is you're pretty sure you're right about everything. Right? Which either makes you God or makes you think you are. And it probably explains a lot about why your relationships aren't going so well right now, but that's a whole nother sermon series for me. Because if there's a little bit of humility instead of arrogance that says, you know what, I have beliefs, I have convictions, there's ways I see the world, but I'm probably wrong about some of them. Then you could be open to the idea that when you notice where you're wrong, you could make it right. But if you don't notice, if you don't think you're wrong, that's going to be a big challenge. So I'll give you another show of hands. How many of you think you might be wrong about something? Everybody, good, well done. Now here's the kicker, right? Here's the kicker. So what is it that you're wrong about? You don't know. That's what's so hard about it. You can carry the posture that says, yeah, I'm probably wrong about something, but you don't know what you're wrong about. And this is the point for today. Something doesn't have to be true for it to carry the power of truth in your life. The things that you believe incorrectly, you're arranging your life around them right now. And if you saw the world correctly, if you believed the right things, you would readjust your life, because something doesn't have to be true to have the power of truth in your life. We explored this a few years ago, and Jamie, I love this. He used the example of that people believe carrots are good for your eyes, right? They're not. Now, some of you want to argue with me right now. You're going to Google it, right? You're going to fact check me while I'm teaching here. But I can promise you, carrots are not good for your eyes. But if you believe carrots are good for your eyes, then you're going to think, oh, my kids need to eat carrots, right? You're going to serve them. Like, you'll live according to what you believe is true. That's the point. And today what I'm going to talk about, this is why it's so important, is something that I think most people are wrong about, or if I was to say it gently, I think most people misunderstand. I bet half the people in this room have a misunderstanding about what I'm going to talk about today, and it is fundamental to what Christianity is all about. And if you're off on a fundamental belief about Christianity, it'll shape all kinds of horrible things, toxic things in your life. My guess is 80 to 90% of people in America misunderstand this. And so today I want to give you this device so you can use it in your life. Now, I'm going to use 3 simple references from the book of John in the New Testament. John was a friend of Jesus. He was a biographer of Jesus. He wrote down the story of Jesus' life. And just three things I want you to pick up from this. It starts with this. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. That's what Jesus says. He says there's a thief. Think of it, some of you grew up with the idea of Satan or the devil, the evil one, the deceiver. That doesn't have to be more weird than you want it to be. It's just this idea that there's a force, there's an evil one in this world, and one of his roles in your life is to whisper lies to you that you'll believe. And if you believe them, it'll shape the way you live your life. But he's a thief. He's actually stealing life from you. He'll say things like, you'll never overcome that habit you have. You've tried. You'll never overcome it. And you might just start believing that. He might say something like, that thing you did, that piece of your past, it's more than could ever be forgiven. You're too far gone. You can't make up for that. And it'll shape who you are if you believe what he says about that. He might say, did you see what you just did? God's probably mad at you about that. He's probably punishing you for it right now. And if you let yourself think that way, then the thief will come. He'll steal, he'll kill, he'll destroy. But Jesus says, I've come that you could have life and have it to the full. And then he shows us what he means by that. So here's what I'm going to have you do. I'm going to have you draw this morning. If you're following along on the printed outline, you can draw on the outline. If you're following along on the digital outline, go analog with me for a moment. There's cards in the back of the chairs along with pins. I want you to draw this out because I think this will help you understand something very significant. So last week, Jamie used a circle. Today, I'm going to use a triangle. Okay? So you can just draw this triangle. And when you draw it, I'm going to put 3 different words at the corners of these triangles. Let's at the top of the triangle put the word Father. Father. And Father is the predominant image of who God is in the new covenant in the way that we relate to him. So I don't know how you think about God, but to think of him as your Father is a big deal. To think of him as Dad, Daddy, Daddy-o, Pops. I was listening to a conversation a few years ago. It was between a couple church leaders. One of the church leaders thought we should have everybody dressing up for church, and especially people on the platform, coat and tie. The other guy thought, no, we should be informal. And the guy who was advocating for coat and tie, he kind of made this argument. He said, listen, if you were going to meet someone really important, the governor of a state or the president of the United States, he said, wouldn't you dress up for that? Wouldn't you bring your very, very best? And the person who was in the conversation with it and looked back at him and he said, well, that depends. Is the president my dad? Now, this is the big deal. That when someone's your father, it's rooted in relationship, not formality. This is who God is. Let me give you a second word. This is the word identity. Identity. And the whole concept behind identity is to ask yourself the question, who am I? Who am I really? For our conversation, this is so important for your life. In light of who God is, who am I? How do I see myself? That's the idea of identity. The third one here is the idea of obedience. Obedience. And when I say obedience, I want you to think about your obedience as it relates to the Father, as it relates to God. And obedience is important. I don't want you to miss that in the midst of this whole conversation today. Obedience is very important. You might think of obedience as just not doing the bad things, not doing the wrong things, staying on the straight and narrow, not getting off the path. That's one part of obedience. But obedience is also living into what God has called us to do. And so I tell you all the time, when you see brokenness in the world, when you see something that's not right, not the way God wants it to be, one of the callings of a follower of Jesus, if you're a follower of Jesus, is to step into that brokenness and bring light to the darkness, hope to the despair, healing to the brokenness. And obedience is all about, whether it's my brokenness that I need to pay attention to and be on the straight and narrow, or whether I look around at the world and see its brokenness and live into it, this is obedience. Now, how these 3 things relate to each other is everything. So I'm going to have you draw a couple of arrows with me, okay? Half the people here and 90% of the people in the world think the relationship goes like this. God is the Father, and if I obey, then he'll accept me as his child. God is the Father, and if I obey, then he'll accept me as his child. I have conversations with people about this all the time. The whole relationship with God is framed in the idea of earning. If I do the things he wants me to do, if I show up on Sunday, if I give a little money, if I follow the 10 Commandments, if I serve him, if I go on the serving day, then he'll accept me. It is an if-then scenario, and you're catching on to this, I'm sure. It makes our relationship with God conditional on our behavior. Now, some of you are sitting there right now and you thought the knuckles blew your mind? This isn't right. Some of you are sitting there right now and in your mind, you're thinking, Greg, I know that. But I'm going to come up on some examples a little later in my message, and you're going to realize you thought you knew that, but you actually live this way. So I want you to take these two arrows that you just drew with me and actually cross them out. Say, that's not the way it works. And instead, I want you to draw an arrow right here from Father straight to identity. That if the words of Jesus are correct, obedience will eventually become important. But it has zero factor in whether God would accept me as his child. So, look at these two scriptures from the Gospel of John with me. It says, yet to all who did receive him. Receiving something is a passive action. You have to receive it, but it's not about earning. It's not about gaining. It's not about performing. To all who did receive him and believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. And the image here, there's an image in the book of Revelation that gives this. It's as if God is knocking on the door of your heart. As if he's knocking on the door. He wants a relationship with you. And he's trying to say to you, there's nothing that you can do that would make me love you more. And there's nothing that you can do that would make me love you less. I want to be your father. I want to be part of your life. And we'll get to a conversation about obedience, but to insert it here is toxic. I'd like to adopt you as my child. This is another way that it says in the Gospel of John. See what great love the Father has lavished on us, that we should be called children of God, and that is what we are. And I don't know who it is in the room right now. I'm sure it's more than one person, but you need me to look you in the eye and say, no matter what you've done, no matter what your story is, God would like for you to be part of his family. All you have to do is receive it. You will be a child of God. You'll be his sons and daughters. He will be your father. And that is what you are. So you might ask the question, so where does obedience come into this? Well, it's a great question. And the answer is, obedience has to come after identity. To get obedience in the wrong place, in the wrong direction of this triangle is what is toxic. So what happens here is, instead of saying, I'm obligated to be obedient in order to become God's child, what actually happens is, God will accept me as his son, as his daughter, and out of gratitude, out of kind of an overwhelming sense that he would welcome even me, yes, I will try to live out the life that God has for me. See, this means the Father's love is unconditional. This means it's not performance-based. There's nothing that you have to do. This means that God loves you just the way you are. And if we could get our minds around that, it would start to shape everything. I don't know whether you grew up in a healthy family. I don't know if you had a healthy father. I don't know if your earthly father reflected the toxic side of this, or whether your earthly father reflected the healthy side of this. It should be very little surprise to us that people misunderstand this, because pretty much all the rest of life works this way. You think of God as an authority figure, kind of like your boss. And then when you think about your boss, with your boss, it kind of works like this. Like things are good as long as I'm doing my stuff. You think this is how it works when I pay my bills? People are happy as long as I pay my bills? Almost all of life in this broken world works this way. And so you have to download a new operating system, because something doesn't have to be true for it to hold the power of truth in your life. And if you live according to this, it will mess you up with God. But if you say, God accepts me, I am his child, now I'm going to live that out, it means everything. I grew up in a healthy family. My dad was not perfect, and I could tell you some places where in instances I felt this was backwards, but on the whole, my family got this right. And I don't know in the family you grew up in if having your last name meant something, like if there was a family identity to who you are. But in my family, my parents made a big deal of that. They would say to me and my brothers, hey, you're a Lee. You're a Lee, and that matters. And I've done that with my kids. I try to tell our kids, I say, hey, in the Lee family, never forget this. We are givers, and we take responsibility. In the Lee family, we're givers, and we take responsibility. And I just want that to be true in the dynamic of our family. And here's what that meant. It meant when I was a teenager, and I was getting ready to go out and have some fun and potentially get into trouble, as all teenagers do, the last thing my mom would say to me on the way out the door was not a list of rules. She would always say to me, just remember who you are. Just remember who you are. And I think the way I received it was she was saying it about the Lee name, and she was saying it about the name of Christ himself, because that's who we are. And if I can just remember who I am, that will shape my behavior. But it's never a list. It's a response. And if you think about this wrong, it will mess up your life. Let me give you a few images for where I think this triangle should come to mind for you as you go through everyday life. Okay, when you picture God, you should remember this triangle accurately. Because I don't know how you picture God. Like when you look up, do you think, he's for me? He wants to know me. He wants me to succeed. He wants what's best for me. Is that your picture of God? It's hard to have that picture of God if you think it's conditional. I was sitting down with one of my neighbors this past week. They don't go to Suncrest and, had kind of bouncing around in their faith, but going through a tough time. And so I sat down for coffee with them. And when I looked them in the eye and I said, God loves you just the way you are. God loves you just the way you are. I got the distinct sense that up until that moment, they didn't picture God that way. And if you don't picture God that way, it will mess you up. You should remember this triangle whenever you start to consider baptism. I have this conversation around baptism all the time because baptism, like one of the fundamental things from the scriptures about baptism is it is the moment where you receive this, right? You say, I believe, I trust, I want to follow your way, God. You're receiving that, and then you get baptized. And then I'll sometimes talk with people about baptism, and they'll say weird things to me. This is weird. Maybe you said it, though. They'll say, oh, Greg, yeah, I want to get baptized, but I need to get some things straight in my life first. you have the total wrong operating system. You must see God like this, that I have to get some things straight. I need to clean some things up myself before I do that. I'm like, that is a toxic way to think about baptism. If instead you would think, I would like to be a child of God. I'd like to identify with his death and burial and resurrection. And then in response to that, my life will be shaped. That would be the right way to think about baptism. Let me give you another one. You should remember this triangle accurately. When you prepare to die. Well, it just got heavy in here real fast, didn't it? But how many people in this room, how many people in your neighborhood think this? This is 100% wrong. I don't care if you were taught this way, I'm telling you it's wrong. People think the way you'll end up with God forever in heaven is because you're a good person. Because you did enough good things, because you were more good than bad, and you don't know what it is. Like, is it, do I have to be 51% good or 71% good or 98% good? You can't even answer that question, but somehow in your mind, you think, I know who ends up in heaven. People who do good things. And the scriptures would tell you that is absolutely wrong. It's actually toxic. It makes you think, if I do good things, then I get to heaven. But the people who are in heaven are the children of God. They're the people who want to be the children of God. The ones who have received him. You got to think about this. If you think your good behavior, your good deeds gets you to heaven, then what is the cross about? When Christ died on the cross, the whole idea was that you can't be good enough, and he loves you anyway, and he would like to make a way for you to be his child, so God himself would send his son into the world with great love for you and die and suffer on the cross to make a way for you to become his child without you having to do a thing. And the moment you think your plan for getting to heaven is you were a good person, I fear for you. Because it's by grace, through faith, that we've been saved. This is not of ourselves. Can you imagine how many people have the wrong operating system? And the implications of this are enormous. You should remember this triangle accurately when you feel like you're failing. And you should feel like you're failing sometimes. I feel like I'm failing sometimes. But when you feel like you're failing, you've heard me say this before, like it's like some people, they say, I've messed up. I hope my dad doesn't find out. And some people say, I've messed up. I need to go find my dad. And you can play that out in the earthly relationship of your life, and I'm not sure how it works in the earthly relationship of your life, but if you will imagine God as a good father that we just sang about, then your response to God himself would not be, I have to hide it. It would be, I messed up. I need to talk to my dad. You see, this is, I bet my life. I bet my life on you. And then I'll live out a different way because I know God is with me. Sometimes you feel like you're failing and you keep failing. And somehow in your mind, you think the answer to overcoming that habit that you haven't been able to beat yet or stop failing is willpower. You think it's up to you. But if you've ever thought that beating that habit that's unhealthy and ungodly is up to you, you're living on this operating system. You think, I got to do it myself because then it'll be okay. But this says, no, God is with you. And when you receive him, you receive his Spirit. And the Spirit actually is what helps you now to overcome. See, one of the reasons this image has become even more powerful to me in the last couple of years is because a lot of you know, a couple of years ago, we brought a foster son into our house. He was 17 years old. We thought it was a short-term thing, and we were just going to help him for a season. And he ended up being with us for a while. And after he'd been with us for about a year, our family, we just started talking and thinking, like, why don't we just adopt him? And formalize, like bring into name what seems kind of true in our relationship. And Jenny and I talked with our 2 biological kids about it, and we all agreed, like, yeah, absolutely. We want Terrell to be part of our family. So about 13 months ago, just before Christmas, Jenny and I went to Terrell and we said, hey, listen, we love you. We know, like, you're part of the rhythm of our life, but it would be really important to us, if you want to formalize this and that we would legally adopt you to be part of our family. And we said, hey, we want you to think about it. You have to decide whether that's what you want. And on Christmas morning, he came to us and he said, I'd love to be part of the Lee family. I'd love to be part of the Lee family. And he became our son. And there's no part of it that thinks, oh, but if he messes up, he might not be our son anymore. That is not the way this works. There wasn't some performance he had to put on to earn being our son. He's our son. And then we figure it all out after that. And you could be a child of God. And then you figure out the obedience after that. And I do think with Terrell and with Jackson and Abby, I think there's a sense in which, yeah, I'm part of this family. So absolutely, out of gratitude, I'll shape my life in ways I may not have shaped it otherwise. That's the healthy look at this. Because otherwise, it's almost like you're a slave. This is how the scriptures describe it in the book of Romans. It says, for those who are led by the Spirit of God, you've received the Spirit of God. You've said, yes, I'll bet my life I want to be part of this family. Those who are led by the Spirit of God, you are the children of God. The Spirit you received, it doesn't make you slaves so that you have to live in fear. That's how slaves live. They think, oh, if I don't perform, then I'm probably out. But you don't have to be a slave to fear. The Spirit you received brought about your adoption into sonship. You became a child of God. You became God's son or his daughter. And so you can cry out, and this is a beautiful expression, Abba, Father. The word Abba is an Arabic term. It's just a very intimate term for father. Maybe the best way to say it is Daddy, Father. Everything you have is mine, and everything I have is yours. And it will shape the way that I live my life, but it's rooted in being your child. Don't ever forget this. I want to pray that we seal it in our minds today. God, the triangle is just an image to help us remember. But every time we're prone to earn or to think that your love is conditional or that you're probably penalizing us for something we did, whenever those things run through our mind, God, remind us of this triangle. That we simply receive you and your Spirit enters into us. And then we're honored to live our lives as your children. I pray this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Well, I really hope that was helpful for integrating faith with life. Listen, if you're in Northwest Indiana, I'd love to have you join us in person. Head over to suncrest.org and plan your visit.